Hello everyone, welcome back to the kitchen today. Stouffer's makes this white lasagna that's vegetable based that we haven't been able to buy in a long time, and I kind of been wanting it, so I decided I was going to maybe make my own. I'm going to make a couple of them, freeze it up, but I'm going to make it with chicken and pork, vegetables, some bacon, and the like. It'll be a bechamel based lasagna rather than a tomato based. So let's see what we can get started. Alright, let's get things started with some vegetables preparation here. We got yellow squash. I'm going to cut these into maybe some half moons. I got a mix of white and yellow onions that I'm going to dice pretty small. And I've got some carrots that I'm also going to cut into sticks and then dice them into small bits. I do have one pre-prepped kind of thing. I have made some roasted garlic yesterday, several cloves of garlic, cut off just the top, drizzle a little oil on them and wrap them up in tin foil, bake them at like 400 for 35 minutes, something like that, till they become really soft and mushy, and then you just squeeze out the roasted garlic. So I've got this here that we're going to put into the bechamel later. I've also got some bags of spinach, and that'll do it. So let's go ahead and kind of jump into doing this. So I'm going to kind of look at each one separately and then maybe skip all the actual labor of it. So I've got my yellow squash. I'm going to take and just kind of cut off either end of the squash. Then I'm going to cut them in half lengthwise. And then I'm not going to be too careful about getting like super thin slices here. I kind of want some chunks, so that's about 1/4 inch. So just like that. So I'm going to do that up, and I'll come back when it's ready to do the next one. All right, we are back, and that is done. One handy tip: I keep a bowl for my chopped veggies. I also keep a separate bowl just here for cut-offs, garbage, that sort of stuff that all gets kind of thrown away. It keeps it nice and clean and all in one place. It also makes it easier to clean up when it's all got a place to be. You can just dump in the trash when you're done. I'm going to keep these separate from the others. I'm going to cook them separately. We'll just see how it goes. I probably have more than I need by a good bit, but that's okay. What I don't use in lasagna will just get used for other meals. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so next thing, go ahead and cut up some onions. So I want a reasonably smaller dice. I don't want just giant chunks. I kind of want it to cook down. I don't want to just be biting into chunks of onion. The chunks of yellow squash will be where some of the texture is with the meat and the noodles and cheese, that sort of stuff. So let's cut this down. I'm just going to cut the top and the bottom off. So I've got a flat spot. Cut it in half. Put that in my garbage bowl. Just kind of peel the outer bit of layer here. And then the way I'm going to do this dice is I'm going to put my two flat sides, got it cut in half. I'm going to look about 1/4 inch, and I'm just going to hold it. This is not the way the chefs do it. It's the way I've been doing it forever, so I know it works for me. So I've got them all together, cut this way, then I'm just going to turn them. I'm going to cut them not tiny dice, I don't really care about that, until I get where this wall's sort of not super stable. I just knock it over and then run the knife to the last little bit. And we'll repeat that for the rest of the onions. And I'll be back when I'm done. Alright, we're back. Onions are diced. I'm going to put the carrots in with these, so no big deal there. I'm just going to chop those up next. So for carrots, there's usually maybe some gnarly bits at either end, especially with the root pieces and the like. So I usually just cut off the ends, and then maybe in half or in thirds, depending how long they are. I'll do half for these. Okay. Then with my fingers on either side, I put my knife blade in between. I do have a very sharp knife, and so I keep things steady, and then I rock through to cut them in half this way. I'm trying to keep every bit of fingers out of the way, especially when you put carrots a little harder, so you have to be a little more careful, I think, for some of that. I'm going to cut them from here either in half or in thirds, or if they're real thick, maybe even more pieces, but I want to do about thirds for this. I don't want really big pieces, so okay. And then once they're in like little sticks, I'm going to cut them into little pieces like this. Okay, I'll come back when it's all done. Alright, onions and carrots are prepped. I'm going to set them off to the side. I'm going to do some of the meats next. So I've got pre-ground pork. I also have just some thick cut bacon. So I'm going to use the different cutting board for that. I prefer to just use mostly vegetables from my wooden cutting board that I made, and use the plastic for particularly chicken, pork, other cross-contaminated things. So I've just got 1.5 pounds of thick cut bacon here. I'm just going to cut it in half to make it easier to kind of work with. And I probably want to try to cut this into thirds, like that. And then with these strips, maybe do about half of this at a time here. Kind of stack it up, and then just cut those into pieces like this. Once that's done, I'll come back, wash cutting board, knife, and then we'll start looking at the chicken. Alright, bacon's all cut up. Next thing I did was I went ahead and grabbed my big package of chicken. I took about 1/3 of it out, which is 4 big thighs. The rest I put in a bag, put it back. I'm going to cook that for food for the rest of the week. But this will go in to the lasagnas. And so what I want to do here, with the bacon, I felt pretty comfortable being able to get it small enough that when it cooks down, it'll be little bitty pieces. It's a lot harder with the chicken to do that. Actually, I'm okay with most of the fat that's on this. But what I want to do is maybe trim it a little bit and then cut it into some slightly smaller pieces. And then I've got a meat grinder attachment for my KitchenAid stand mixer, and I'm going to run it through that. So let's cut this into the smaller pieces, trim it up a little bit, and then we'll come back when we're ready for that stage. Alright, we're back with the chicken cut up into little pieces. I got the stand mixer here with the meat grinder attachment on. Alright, we're going to turn it on. I'm going to go through, show you a little bit of what it looks like. Alright. Put in our pieces. Just grinds it up. You just do this over and over until it's done. And I'll be back. Alright, the chicken is ground up. It went fairly quickly, very easy. I've got this platter of ground pork. I'm just going to mix these two. They're going to cook together, but I want to mix them together because I want to go ahead and add some seasoning to them so that that it's ready to cook and brown and all that stuff. So a little bit of salt, a few pinches of salt. Let's see what we're going to put in. Some garlic powder. I got a bunch of that roasted garlic, which will go into the bechamel, so I don't need to go crazy. I'm going to put in some crushed red pepper. Probably a good bit of that. That'll be for the whole couple of lasagnas. So ground thyme. Put that in there. Poultry seasoning would be good. Just a few things. And I got some dried Italian herbs. I'm just going to put some dried herbs in here too. Perfect. Okay. Want to mix it up. Oh, actually, let's do some fresh black pepper too. Make a good bit of that. Okay. All right. And then I'll mix it all up, and then we'll come back a little bit later. We'll get started cooking the bacon and the meat, and then after the meat's done, I'll cook down the veggies from there. So we'll see you in a minute. All right, I just put on some gloves and mix that up. It's all pretty good now. So the next thing I want to do is take my squash, and I want to put in, I've got some of this olive oil. I'm going to drizzle this with some olive oil because I want to toss this. I've got oven preheated to 425. I'm going to roast this while I cook the meat and prep the noodles and make the bechamel and all that kind of stuff separately from the stovetop. So I'm had to go grab the seasoning real quick. So I've got this. Give it a little toss. And I've got this Grill Mates vegetable seasoning. I love this stuff for just roasted vegetables in general. I imagine this ought to be just fine for something like this. So I'll put a generous bit here on the top. Oop, getting a little wild with it. Now we've got this. I've got one of my big baking sheets. Just put some parchment paper over the top of it so that I can spread this out. I want to try to get as close to an even single layer as I kind of can. But it doesn't have to be perfect. Just don't want big thick spots if possible, so everything kind of roasts and cooks pretty quickly. All right, I'm gonna put this in the oven at that 425, 30, 40, 45 minutes. We'll see how it goes. Keep an eye on it every little bit. Okay, we're back here over the stove. I've got my really wide fryer pan. Tall sides skillet, and I got a little bit of oil in there. I am going to cook the bacon first, so I don't really have to have oil, but just to get things started, put just a little bit in there so that we get the good contact cooking for the bacon. So I got about on medium high and put it all in here. And then we're going to just sit here, move it around, and it's going to take a little while. There's a good bit of volume, which means it's going to take a bit. So I'm going to pause it, come back here in a minute after we get a little further in the process. All right, another couple of minutes have passed. I went ahead and took a minute to pick up after myself. It's a pretty pro tip. Clean as you go. It becomes a lot less daunting of a task. Clean the knives, the cutting boards, the bowls that I've already emptied, even the grinder. So it only takes a few minutes if you do it as you go. As you can see, we've rendered a bunch of the fat. There's a lot of liquid kind of in the bottom. Just keep stirring it a bit, and then just let it go. We're trying to get close to crunchy. I don't want bacon bits like for a salad. I want bacon pieces, so I'm going to take it off before it gets real crunchy at this point. But I'm just going to let you listen to some bacon sizzling for a second. I mean, who doesn't love that? All right, we are back again. And you can see the bacon is just swimming in its grease. You can see some darker colors start to form. We are almost ready to take this off of here. So one particular note, off to the side, I've got a bowl with paper towel lining it. A handful of those. We're going to soak up some of the grease out of that. I'm going to leave the rest of the grease in here. I have separately, I have my wooden spoon that I've been using for when the bacon was raw. I have my slotted spoon to dish it out of there for after it's cooked. And it's important to make sure we maintain some level of separation for cross-contamination between raw and cooked products. So just a note, I think we're getting pretty close to where I want to take it off. I know that when it sits there in that bowl, it will continue to cook more than this, and I don't want it to get super crispy, so I think now's the time. Let's go ahead and start taking it off of here. So, grab my slotted spoon, let it drain, and then over we go. Alright, we'll just clean it all up. I'll come back to you in a minute. Alright, we're back. Bacon's resting in here. Notice that I tried to push some of it up against the sides of this bowl so that it isn't just soaking in the bottom in one spot. Maybe we get some wicking off on the walls. Just barely starting to smoke. I'm still at medium high. I'm going to be taking a big ball of ground meat with all the seasoning and stuff in it from earlier. Just right into this hot grease. And I'm going to try to spread it out to basically one layer and let it sit for a minute. I'm going to try to thin this out a little bit. Be careful, we got hot grease and hot pan, so as you're pressing, don't touch the side, don't get splatter grease, that sort of thing. I have burned myself enough times that I really try to avoid it, even though it still happens. But here we go. Alright, we're getting to about there. Perfect. Okay, now it's about a flat disc. It's going to fry up. I want it to crust up on the bottom. I might even turn the heat up, try to get closer to high for just a minute. And then I've also got one of these things that'll come in, and I'll use that to kind of break it up as it cooks into more of a fine crumble of browned ground meat. Alright, I'll be back in a minute. Alright, we're back just a couple minutes later. Of one note thing I wanted to point out is I went ahead and kind of like dug a little hole in the middle, and then a couple places I went in and just kind of twisted and made like a little hole so that steam could escape through these holes and not just get trapped under this big flat disc. I want contact, I want heat, I want some Maillard reaction taking place. If I look at the bottom, you can see that there's a little bit of browning starting to take place. That's a good thing. I'm going to let this go for another minute or so more. I want to build up a little bit of that before I start actually grinding it together and then trying to get some more browning. You don't need to brown every surface, every little bit, but it's easiest to start with some browning and then go from there. Alright, next stage. I've kind of started separating things into like some bigger chunks. I'm still not like hard stirring yet because I want to pick these up and I want to try to flip them gently. We got hot oil on the bottom here. We don't want to splash that. I just want to make sure that the most raw side of this disc is actually back down in contact with the grease in the bottom of the pan. Okay. And I'll cook this for just a hair longer. Set my spoon off to the side, and I'll get ready to start using this to break it up. I'm not going crazy yet. I just want to start breaking it up a little bit. It's still big chunks. I want that bottom side to cook. I want to make that bottom side stay on the bottom by and large. But I'm just pushing down, twisting, starting a breaking up process. And then as time goes on, I'll just start doing this a whole bunch more till it's all good and browned up and cooked. Alright, now we're back. It's all kind of ground up pretty good, cooked pretty through. I think everything's in a good spot. Now note, I used ground pork and ground chicken and added some spices. That's just basically a type of sausage. You could have skipped all this and used some kind of ground sausage and went straight to cooking it. You could have used like Italian sausage or some kind of links and cut into rounds. Like there's all kinds of ways you go about it, but I wanted to go ahead and do it not necessarily fully from scratch, but we're pretty close. Everything but the noodles is just about from scratch. So I'm gonna get this out of here, turn the heat off for a moment, and I'll come back to you when we move on to the next step. Alright, just took the ground meat out, have it draining also in a bowl with some paper towel, and right about that time the timer for the squash finished. I just pulled it out of the oven. It's been cooking for 35 minutes or so at 425. This is about perfect. I just want a lot of the liquid out. I want it to be something edible where it is actually cooked. It doesn't have to be real dark, especially for this application, but I don't want a lot of liquid in it because that'll water down really directly the lasagna when we make it. So this is about perfect. I'm just going to take it out, put it in a bowl, and then we'll come back when it's time to cook the rest of the vegetables, and then make the bechamel and noodles and get ready to put this thing together. Okay, we are back. I just started some water with a bunch of salt in it in order to cook down the lasagna noodles. I have my skillet heating back up. With the bacon grease, I added a little bit of vegetable oil to go with that, just so that I'd have some. It's on medium-high. I'm going to go ahead and come in here with the carrots and onions. I'm going to not so much like brown these. I want to sweat them down. So I'm okay with there being a big volume in this pan. I'm also going to put in a bunch of salt and probably a little bit more seasoning. We'll go with some black pepper. A couple of pinches of salt. That salt will help pull out some moisture out of the vegetables. Let's go with some garlic powder. Kind of mix this all together here. Now the idea for this is I want to sweat this down. There's some water that comes out of it. I want the onions to be translucent, very clear. I want the carrots to cook all the way down until they're soft and mushy. Don't really care to keep a lot of texture in them at this stage. I think most of the texture will come from the noodles and the cheese and the yellow squash. And this is just flavor additives and a little bit of volume for our final product. So I'm going to sweat these for a bit. Get down. I don't know, this will probably take 5-10 minutes or so of cooking this. Probably closer to 10 plus. And then once those are down, then I'll go and put in the spinach and start making the bechamel right after that. Okay, we're back again. And you can see the onions have let off some of the liquid. They started to turn a little bit clear. Carrots aren't quite done where I want them to be just yet. And this could cook a bit longer. So what I'm going to do is add in just a little bit of broth. This is some vegetable broth. Doesn't really matter. Just a little bit of liquid. I'm not going to put in a ton. I just want enough to help cook the carrots. And I'll cook this until the liquid is essentially gone. Until it evaporates away. So it's careful not to put too much, just a little splash so that there's some liquid there. So it starts boiling. And then I'll basically cook this until the liquid is gone. And then we'll go into the spinach. Alright, we've cooked that down. And you can see that that liquid we put in there is pretty much all gone. Off camera I went ahead and rough chopped my spinach leaves out of the bag. I figured it'd be better, even after it cooks down and wilts down, that when you put it in the lasagna, you don't want to take a bite and then like string out a piece of spinach. Every bite you want to be part of itself. Okay. So now I'm just going to wilt this. This will go real fast. The volume will also go down really quickly on the spinach once it starts to wilt, which should take very little time. My noodles are boiling. They've got just a couple of minutes. I'm going to cook them very, very much underdone, but I do want them to at least start the cooking process, get some of the starch going, make them very malleable, all of that sort of stuff. And here we are. I think this is about done. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pause, make sure everything's in order, and then we'll get started on the last bit before assembly. Alright, we got the last thing to make before we just start assembly. So I'm going to take some butter, and again I'm making multiple lasagnas with this, so I'll make quite a lot. 2 sticks and equal amounts of flour. Melt this into a paste, just like you're making white gravy or a roux for Cajun cuisine. Melt all this together. And then I add a whole bunch of milk. Bring this up to a boil. And then it'll start to thicken. I might have to add some more milk to it. I'm going to wait. I'm going to put in that roasted garlic, but before I do, I want to make sure that it's the consistency I want. Add a little salt. Add a little black pepper. And I got more milk here in the wings because I can already tell that's way too thick. I want this to be a sauce, kind of like a thickened marinara consistency when it's all said and done. And we'll let that come to a boil, we'll balance it, and then we'll show you what I'm talking about when we get back. Alright, we're pretty much there. Kill the heat on this. And it'll thicken a little as it cools anyway. You can see. You can see as I whisk through it how it leaves lines behind. That's going to be about right. At this stage, I'll dump in some of this roasted garlic. I'll keep some out. I want to kind of blend it in here. It's all real super soft after roasting it, so and you can see how it's already thickening a ton more. Okay, that's a roasted garlic bechamel. Now let's put everything together. Alright, let's start some assembly. First things first. We're going to put in a little of the bechamel on the bottom. And off the side here, I'm going to take my noodles. Hot, hot, hot. Be very careful. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I kind of want to have a plan. So these are just about perfect length for this 13 by 9. All right. After that, I'm going to put in just the littlest bit of shredded mozzarella, just to kind of form, that'll melt, form a bit of a layer there, help solidify that noodles. Take my veggie mix, spread, doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want coverage. Okay. Some of my ground, basically sausage. A little of that yellow squash. Sprinkle of bacon. Couple of dollops of ricotta and cottage cheese mixture. Then some more bechamel. This is my kind of everything layer. Add in some noodles. A little bit of cooked veggies. Layer it up. The top layer is a little different. If I can get these noodles out of here. There we go. Kind of stuck together. There we go. Okay, now for this top layer, I'm going to put this very thin coating of the bechamel. And I've got this fresh mozzarella cheese. I'm just going to pinch some in places. All over the top so that it melts a little bit like a pizza. There we go. And then the last thing's left. I'm going to take some panko breadcrumbs. And just create a nice little layer on the top. I have some oil spray. Just to put a little bit of oil in those breadcrumbs so they brown. And then I'm going to put this in the oven covered, 350 for close to 25 minutes or so. And then after that, made a little bit of a mess, going in a hurry. After that, I'm going to take the top off, maybe turn the temp up a little bit, and then let it try to brown in the open. So cover it to cook to start, and then take the top off. And let's see what it looks like in a bit. Okay, we are back. I ended up making 2 of the same size lasagna that you saw me assemble, and plus a third, even a slightly larger pan that I happen to have. So 3 total lasagnas out of everything that we made. I cooked 2 of them at the same time at 350 for 35 minutes, and then took the tinfoil off the top, up the temp to like 450, and then let them go for another 15-20 minutes. And then right at the end, turn on the broiler, put them under just to kind of brown the top just a little bit further, and we are looking premium. Now comes the hard part, which is wait. It's got to cool down, and once it cools down, then we can cut it. If we cut it now, it'll just run everywhere. We need it to set, and in order to do that, it's got to cool. So I gotta just leave it. So I'm gonna end here. I'll come back, I'll cut it, and we'll make a little plate, see what it looks like.